all here because we are beginning our 5-week journey through Joseph E. Stiglitz, People, Power, and Profits. And so here's a little quote from the book that we really love and speaks to why we chose this. And so, Jamel, could you read that real quick?
Sure. Excuse me. In America, being born into the right family and growing up in the right neighborhood have increasingly become the most important ingredient for success in life. The American dream of equality, of opportunity, is a myth. A young American's life prospects are more dependent on the income and education of his parents than now, more than almost any other advanced country.
Again, we're here for Stiglitz, People, Power, and Profits. And in week 1, we're going to be going through chapters 1 and 2. And Jamel is going to just kind of share that high-level summary that Robin helped put together that we did share in the Reader's Guide. And then we'll get started with our Q&A. So, Jamel.
Sure. So we've got the preface in chapters 1 and 2 for this week. And maybe some of you haven't caught up with the readings yet, and that we understand that. The materials that Robin puts together that you have at your disposal really go through a lot and provide some additional material as well. So make sure that you take a look at that. The book starts out with a preface from Joseph Stiglitz in which he talks about growing up in Gary, Indiana. And much of the quote that we read in the very beginning reflects, I think, on his personal experience of having grown up during this great age of capitalism, but now seeing how things have turned out in Gary, Indiana, reflecting on that. And he's associated a lot of this with the economic policies implemented under Reagan and again under Bush, fostering deregulation and lower taxes on high earners and corporations, with the assertions that that would lead to economic growth. Political media discourse is also focused on competition amongst key players in a given market instead of market domination of those key players and the labor and resource exploitation. He talks a lot about the difference between the creation of a country's wealth through productivity and the usurping of that wealth through what he calls rental activity, add-ons, where people are essentially extracting wealth from others as opposed to creating things. He says that several industries also took efforts to either hide or cast doubt on the scientific evidence that showed their environmental and public health impacts. Strong belief in American exceptionalism led to assumptions that we were being cheated by outside forces as opposed to being exploited from within. And he notes that Trump exploited worker frustration and distrust for previous economic policies. He talks about the fact that a typical measure of growth has been GDP, gross domestic product, but notes that not everyone has benefited from that growth. Per capita GDP has doubled over the years, and worker productivity has increased 7-fold. This is over the past 60 years. But inflation-adjusted median income for a full-time male worker has changed little over the past years. So this is all about the fact that the country has actually gotten the country is wealthier, but that wealth is much more concentrated in the top percent. And he's spending a lot of time in this book talking about how the inequality that we have in our country is quite detrimental to our economy overall, and there's a whole lot of waste there. So I'll leave it at that, Wes, just in terms of a general overview of what he's been talking about in the book. And I guess we begin to get into some of the discussions, or maybe even some of the particular highlights.
Yeah, and before we do that, we're going to start off with a poll, and it should be pushed out on your end. And we're asking, Stiglitz says for our economy to change for the better, we need to change our politics. In changing our politics and policies, which would you emphasize more? educating voters on how a large, complex economy needs to function to create greater prosperity, or restricting how corporate interests and the wealthy influence politics. So you should have saw a pop-up come up on your Zoom screen, and it looks like people are starting to vote. So let's find out how it goes. We'll give you about a minute and a half.
And Wes, I don't know, do people see those results, or is it just you and me and Robin who are seeing them? Peg, can you see them?
They cannot yet, but
Okay.
I will push it out once it looks like everyone has kind of voted. We're up to 20 participants, so probably just a few more left. Gonna give it about 10 more seconds. Which would you emphasize more? All right, we are at a minute and 30 seconds, so I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to push out the results. So 32% said educating voters about the large complex economy and how it needs to function to create greater prosperity. And then 68% restricting how corporate interests and the wealthy influence politics. So about 3/4 of us on restricting corporate influences and interests. So very nice. Appreciate the participation. So I'm going to stop sharing that, and then we are going to go off to our first question, and we'll have it on the screen so that you don't have to go to another document. But that reader's guide that was shared in the email, and I believe Robin might be putting in the chat. If you want to view it that way, that's an option for you as well. So, Robin, did you want to start off with question one, or is Jamel?
I guess I'll start out because Robin, I think, is cutting and pasting. So Stieglitz defines a humane economy as one that delivers a middle-class lifestyle for the majority of citizens. What are the basic requirements for a humane economy, and what defines the middle class? We're just going to leave that open for discussion, and Wes is really good about waiting for people to chime in. So I'm going to just stop and hope folks have some thoughts to share. And I can't see if people have raised their hand, Wes. So if you could look out for that.
Yeah, it looks like Roger Manzano has his hand raised. So I'm going to ask you to unmute, Roger.
Hey, good evening, everyone. So I answered, I'm gonna just be transparent. I picked the first option. So I was a third of the audience. And I think that has to do something along with answering this question here, because if I had two options and I wanted to fully understand how the operation of the system functioned to help understand, to give me like a more level playing field, I'd rather start there than be tossed into a system that I don't have that type of view into seeing what a future could look like in a society, because I don't know how it functions and what I need to do to make it function well as what I need to do to function well myself. So I feel like that is more humane. You could definitely like get into the second option, and that's for sure a secondary and undebatably a primary thing that we need to be careful of, and that's for sure a conversation to have. But at the same time, corporations and businesses, they do have a firmer grasp of how things really do work. So there definitely has to be a line of communication, but there's always got to be a way to kind of protect the society from having too much influence go the wrong way. So there's always got to be those checks and balances that this country, for as imperfect as it could be today, it's always perfecting itself, and that's the beauty of this country, isn't it?
Those are great points, Roger. I'll say I think I don't get to vote on the thing because we're like hosting it. But I would just share that I'm torn between the two things, but I almost feel like the only way that you're going to actually be able to restrict, some of the activity that's going on, in terms of abuse of the system, is to get people smarter about how it's being abused. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing. I see Susan had a comment in the chat, but I don't know if she wants to share that more broadly, or if anybody else has their hand up.
We are going to go to Annette, and then
Okay, great.
Hi, it's really good to see the three of you back. Wes, Jamal, Robin, it's just good to see you. I went for the second option because while I think education is important, we're lacking in education in so many areas. And I'm thinking of a faster solution. So that's why I went with option B. When I look at your question here, what are the basic requirements for a humane economy? It's an economy where people aren't stressed to the max to make wondering if they're going to be able to make their bills by the end of the month. A humane economy means that basic that health, that our health system is not built on someone's money. It just seems like healthcare is for the rich these days. So that would be something for me to talk about, a humane economy, and just basically being able to live not extravagantly, but to at least have your needs met. That to me is what a humane economy is.
Thank you, Annette. Something that allows somebody to afford housing, food, clothing, basic care, without the stress, and without having to, with a reasonable workload, as well, so that you can actually enjoy life. Other thoughts?
go ahead, Kara.
But I think Annette might have said healthcare, which is like the number one thing of a humane economy, is everybody has to have healthcare. Not what we have. It's ridiculous. And though I like the first option of educating everybody, it's just not possible. There's way too much information, misinformation. There's no way to educate. It's just a lot of people seem to like revel in their ignorance. Like it's cool to not know what's going on. Like, I don't know. I think we're past being able to educate people. We really just have to like take the corporations down a notch. It's more technical, different. Thank you.
Thanks. Were there other hands up?
Looks like that is it. But similar things in the, oh, we got Linda. Linda, you should receive a prompt asking you to unmute. There it goes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
I'd just like to say I'm living down here in big Trump country, and I would have picked the first suggestion to educate the public, but it seems like down here, people cannot be educated. Every time you present the facts to them, they don't care. So that's why I chose regulating the corporations. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Should we move on to the next question or discussion, or were there? I mean, I think, Wes, there are a lot, similar comments raised in the chat.
I wanted to just add, if I could, oh, I see Patricia has her hand raised as well. I feel you guys, and I understand very strongly your dismay around the state of people's ideals and their willingness to be educated on the issues. And kind of like to Jamel's point, I feel like it's a chicken and an egg thing. I think part of the reasons why corporations are able to run so rampant is because we don't have a strong understanding of what they are doing to us. So when they tell us that they're doing one thing on the right hand, they're doing something totally different with the left. And so it, like Jamel said, it ends up becoming a chicken and an egg thing, because how do we figure out what we need to actually put in place when we don't have the confidence that we're being given a full and accurate picture of what our economy actually needs to be viable for everyone? And I feel like that is part of the reason why there's such a concerted effort against public school education, because people who are adults now that are pushing back on, like, kind of like to Kara's point, they're kind of reveling in the fact that they don't understand these things, is because as young children, I strongly believe that young kids want to learn, and that's kind of being sapped out of them by this basically a war against our public education system. So off my soapbox. Patricia, I'll turn the baton over to you.
Okay. Hi, how are you? I'm Patricia. And I came in on the tail end. So, but what I'm hearing, we're talking about education. But in any good society, there are going to be people who are indigent, people who are poor, people who are elderly, people who are mentally ill. Those people need to be taken care of. I know there's a lot of money. There's not a lot of money, or nobody cares about these people, but they can also pull a society down as far as healthcare. Like it costs a lot to house someone who's mentally ill. It costs a lot for medication. It costs a lot to keep them alive, but they deserve to be alive as well. Elderly people, we don't live in a society where we don't take care of our elderly. Poor elderly people on a fixed income shouldn't have to be forced to eat cat food because they have to pay their rent or pay their mortgage, or they don't want to go into a nursing home. They want to stay in their homes. I mean, our society, we're better than that.
That's a really good point. And later on in the book, Stiglitz does specifically talk about how we deal with our elderly, both in terms of taking care of them and also trying to provide them with continuing opportunities to feel value and to participate in the economy as well. He's got some interesting thoughts in there, but that in some of the later chapters. So I think you've touched on something that he's touching on as well.
And I will just quickly add, and we'll move to the next question in the chat, that Marcia wrote that also consider the long-term environmental costs of projections of method, and that is a humane society. So I just thought bringing that environmental perspective into our conversation. So, all right. Question 2.
Should we skip this one just for time? It's already 8:30.
Oh, yep. So we're going to move on to this one. What are some popular misconceptions that allow wealth inequality to persist.
Roger's got his hand up.
I think one of the big ones that come to mind quickly, if I can answer quickly, is the perception that it's impossible to be wealthy. I mean, there are a lot of people who just to say, forget it. I'm gonna stay a little bit more pessimist than optimistic, and believe the fact that it's impossible to somehow gain some level of wealth in which comfort after my years in retirement are good enough where I believe I lived a satisfied life that's successful, irrespective of the number of comments you have.
Great point. Thank you, Roger. Patricia.
Okay, one misconception that I know of is that people think that in order to become wealthy, you have to have super degrees. You have to go to college for many years. You have to, you have to spend a lot of money paying back student loans, but that's not necessarily so. I know a lot of rich people that made their money. They got patents, or they got licenses. They didn't go to college. So there's a lot of ways to make a lot of money. That doesn't mean that you're not smart. Some of these people I know are very intelligent. They read a lot. They're very world traveled. They're well versed in their fields. They don't have degrees. They have licenses and they have patents for the things that they created, and they made a lot of money. They specialized.
Yeah, I
So
think
that's
yeah. Sorry, go ahead. So yeah, those are both great points. I think part of the other thing I was thinking about when I wrote this question was not barriers to people acquiring wealth, but some of the popular beliefs and political rhetoric that perpetuate wealth inequality. So we have some comments here in the chat. And Kara says that rich people earned their money, which is definitely something that I hear a lot, especially articles about people who are self-made millionaires and billionaires who actually used a lot of political connections to gain their businesses and their wealth. Gloria mentioned the idea of a zero-sum economy, and that's another great point that Stiglitz mentions and talks about a lot in the book. Linda echoed that as well. And we mentioned it, I think, a little bit in the summary, that the notion that deregulation and lower taxes would lead to the trickle-down effect and would basically stave off wealth ineconomy. I'm sorry, wealth inequality. And you guys gotta speak up. You
Yeah.
so many great comments in the chat. You guys gotta speak up.
The chat is absolutely great. I'm like, yeah.
Gloria wrote that poor people are just lazy. I do hear that quite often, that poor people don't want to work hard. They don't know how to mind their money. But studies have actually shown that not only do low income people work more hours or just as many hours as people who have high wealth, they are also very savvy when it comes to ways to stretch a dollar. And they are also incredibly philanthropic. Lower income people give a higher percentage of their income to charities and to things that aren't tracked, like helping their neighbors, providing a meal to someone who doesn't have anything to eat, providing shelter, like to a friend who is temporarily unhoused, letting a friend sleep in your spare room, sleep on your couch. Those things are rarely tracked, but those are things that people who are of low income communities do for each other constantly. So they are very savvy in terms of learning how to stretch a dollar. Anyone else in the chat want to speak some of these wonderful comments you guys are making?
One I hear is, living and being raised in a more conservative environment. Well, if we raise wages for everyone, all that's going to happen is companies are just going to raise prices. So why even worry about it? That's just how the system works.
Yep, I hear that a lot too.
All right. Should we move on? Oh, Wes Edwards.
Yeah, just one that I hear just because it's an area I've looked at probably more than others is that people sort of in the upper or middle class or up tend to believe that housing is available and affordable at all income levels in the same way that it is for people who have sort of a higher incomes. But the housing stock doesn't work that way at all. And the bite that housing as a basic cost takes out of your income when you're poor is sometimes more than your income. So you have to do things.
Sorry to interrupt, Wes. I'm having trouble hearing you. Can Jamel and other Wes, can you guys hear him okay? I can't understand what he's saying.
It was going in and out a little bit, but just try it again, California West.
Washington West.
Washington West. Washington West.
People upper incomes have an idea that housing is affordable and available at all income levels. And it takes the same proportion of your income when you're at the lower end as it does when you're at the higher end. And that's never been the case. That many people who are poor spend over 100% of your income on housing, and they have to double up or triple up or quadruple up to have anything that is affordable, whether that fits their family needs or personal needs at all. And it changes the where you can live and the accessibility to all sorts of other kinds of opportunities.
Thank you. And thank you for repeating that. I really appreciate it.
I'll just add one thing in, and this just gets to the notion of, well, if you work hard, you can succeed. What we forget, and I think that this is in the book, is that sometimes when there are success stories, where somebody truly has started from nothing and then they have succeeded, where people are almost encouraged to pull the ladder up behind them, so that they forget that that there are others where they came from. Not everybody, but that notion of whenever somebody does succeed or a group succeeds, I guess it gets back into that zero-sum thing. Well, if I did it and I worked hard, I'm not going to necessarily extend a hand and pull somebody else up with me. But even in those situations where somebody may have done it all on their own, they actually haven't done it all on their own. But they've been honestly, they've been lucky, that maybe they got a good set of genes or something like that. They didn't have anything that it's I think that they forget some basic humility when they've succeeded that way.
Agreed. Thank you for that. That's a really important point, because I think that it also inhibits our ability to have solidarity with other people across our income stratification, because people who are able to move up, then that kind of is a way to break their ties to the communities that they've come from.
Mhm. Okay, I see Wes has put the next question, we put the next question in.
Yeah, so this next one, are we doing a disservice to the economic debate by using the term the 99%? Is this category too broad? Is there too much stratification amongst those who are not within the top 1%? Are there too many variables within such a large demographic for strategies to be effective? So thoughts on the term the 99%. Do folks like it? Meh. Dislike it? What are y'all thinking and why?
Okay, I see Annette has her hand raised. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
I don't know that I dislike or don't like the 90% thing. What the 1% has done for me is the statistics that show the incredible income disparity between that 1% that holds this incredible 40% of all the wealth, or I don't know if it's 50 or 60%. I mean, it's just enormous. So what it's done for me is it's just opened my eyes as to the income disparity. I don't mind being part of the 99 or the, that's not a problem for me. But the problem for me is the income disparity that it shows.
Thank you, Annette. Roger, I see you have your hand up. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, this is a really good point in that, and kind of to echo that in a sense, it's like the other thing too is that there are people within the 99%. There are people who may be even associated with the 1% that fight the battles that the 99% fight. So it's, like most things in life and most conversations, debates and stuff, this is just a black and white thing. There's a lot of gray in the middle too, because there's a lot of people within the upper parts of the 99% are fighting extra hard to make sure there's a lot more equality across the spectrum in our country, because they do realize that a stronger middle class is what brought us to where we are. Like that's essentially what kind of made us catapult into the economy that we are today. Once the middle class started to really establish itself and pick up some legs. But it's the black and white picture, and it's definitely something that people can easily just imagine and talk about and debate and stuff like that. So that's the point with that.
Thank you, Roger. Patricia, you have your hand up. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Well, he mentioned the 99%, and that, in other words, there are some do-gooders in the world, and we know that that is true. Or if it wasn't, we'd be in a very bad situation. So I'm hoping I'm hoping that more of the 99%ers fight for a lot of this and people who aren't doing well. And I know that that is to be true, but more people need to do it. More of the 99% need to do it. I agree. That's all.
Just adding my 2 cents here. Oh, never mind. Mary, I see you have your hand up, so I'm gonna ask you to unmute.
I agree with the comments made about the 99% showing the top 1% a slap in the face for those that are in the 99%, that the 1% control the economy essentially, and it's something that the 99% includes the historical racism, the unequal land distribution, the inherited wealth, and government policy, including economic stabilization to make it better for the 99%. We can't wait on do-gooders to do good because there's not enough time to avert a housing crisis and a fentanyl crisis secondary to the housing crisis and the poverty and the cycle of depression and cycle of poverty that's really doing and costing society more than establishing fair wages and economic factors need to be brought under control and take away some of the 1% control of the economy by taxing the wealthy and making sure they pay their fair share to break up some of this massive disparity. And this is a worldwide crisis that was exacerbated by the pandemic, but it's something that requires government intervention. It's too out of control and it's too devastating.
Agreed. Thank you for that, Maria, sorry. Dina, I see you have your hand up, so I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi. As far as asking if there are too many variables, I don't think so. I think maybe I'm a hopeless romantic, but why not start with maybe some of the largest groups, or maybe some of the most urgent groups? Like maybe if the largest group isn't families with hungry children, maybe we can start working on their income first, or like find a way to prioritize. But I don't think there's too many. I think we need to help as many people as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. So Peg, I'll send you an unmute.
Thanks, Robin. I think when the middle class grew, like after the Second World War, there were so many people who all of a sudden started to have what somebody before them never had. They became very myopic, very narrow-sighted, and focused on, I don't want to share what I have because I can remember the time when I didn't have. And because of that, it kind of propagated itself to the point where the middle class ended up shrinking itself, because the middle class always wanted to get to a higher and higher class. And the number of marginalized people grew faster than those people in the middle class were growing.
That's a great point, Peg. And I'll have some thoughts about that as well, but I'm going to ask Roger to unmute first and then come back around to what you're saying, Peg.
Yeah, quickly on the middle class disappearing. That was kind of in line with the unions starting to disappear. There was a direct correlation from a research paper that I remember reading years ago that tied the unionization of this country to the middle class strengthening, and then the disappearance of the unions to the decline of the middle class. if I could find it, I'll send it. But you could probably just Google something and something will pop up around that topic. But that's what ended up happening. I forget what the years were, but we can kind of imagine when they were.
Yeah. So that's a great point, Roger, and it actually ties into what I was perfectly into the point that I was going to make, that Peg was making. Someone else listed in the comments about the book The Sum of Us from Heather McGee, and she talks about that in there as well, about the unions and how having strong unions enabled us to have a very robust middle class. And kind of to Peg's point, there was just so much rhetoric and dog whistling and division that separated people amongst racial lines as opposed to solidarity amongst economic lines, that they were able to basically weaken the solidarity that had formed around unions, because a lot of them basically became cross-racial coalitions of workers. And so when that wedge was drawn, it allowed them to basically take economic advantage of all workers, because it diluted the strength that we had through that cross-racial coalition for better working conditions and better things like better pay.
And Robin, I'll just add, as we continue reading the book, the imbalance between workers and management in the corporate sense, because of the lack of support for unions, is something that comes up quite a bit in the book. So I think it's even in next week's reading, we'll see some more about that too.
And as Pei kind of brought up in the chat, we're seeing, President Biden with a focus on the importance of unions by joining the auto workers tomorrow, I believe. Right, Peg? Is it tomorrow? President Biden will be joining them in their efforts on the picket line, if you will. And yeah, we're definitely seeing this administration focus on that. And I also wanted to point out in the chat, I really love what Beulah said. The 99% makes the 1%. Without the 99%, there would be no 1%. So it maybe is the term 99%, all because we've used that term 1%. So then therefore, yeah, I just really like that. So all right, let's head to the next question. Jamel, are you leading this one? Robin?
Let's see, which one do we want to go to next with time-wise? Why don't we go with number 5? I can do that. Stiglitz states that the underinvestment in people is one of the primary reasons for our economic problems. Is strong investment in people possible in our current political environment? Is it possible with such a pervasive belief in zero-sum ideology, i.e. that someone has to lose something in order for someone else to gain? And I'll just say that a big theme throughout the book is the fact that because things are so unequal, it's exacerbating the fact that we are not investing in enough people who could actually contribute more to the economy than all of this concentration of wealth in just a few. So is strong investment in people possible in our current political environment? Again, I can't see hands raised. I apologize. Oh, wait, I see. I think I now figured out Patricia's hand is raised.
Yes. So I sent an unmute for Patricia. Thank you.
I think it's going to have to be. We're going to have to invest in people in the coming decades, years, in order for us to survive. Because there's only a short amount. It's not enough to go around. It's not enough of anything to go around. The planet is dying. We don't have enough food. The air is no good. We're going to have to invest in people. We need brain pools of diverse people with different ideas. And everybody's not going to be a rocket science. Everybody's not going to be a doctor. But maybe someone could learn a skill and do very good at it, master it, and come up with a way for us to feed each other. We're going to have a food shortage soon. We have too many people on this earth. We're going to have to start investing in people in order for us to survive. Education-wise, we're going to have to help the indigent, help people that are mentally.
Great points. I see Maria has her hand up and Roger as well. And Patricia, just one thing that I'll add, and because it fits on what you said before, investing in people, he points out that we don't have enough people to actually take care of our elderly, and we haven't invested enough people to actually teach our children. So those are some things that come up as well. Maria?
I think we do have enough human capital in the United States to take care of everybody. The problem here is institutionalized racism. We've normalized the abnormal. It's okay for 150,000, 200,000 people to live in the streets on drugs and use drugs openly and use our 911 system and hospitalization of overdose cases, but we're incapable of triaging them into treatment programs. And we're willing to spend in California $40,000 per person per year in the homeless. Instead of helping mortgage assistance or rental assistance to bail people out. We spent over $100,000 a year per prisoner. We have 2.4 million men, not including women, in prison. Add up the $1 trillion price tag for incarcerating our youth and our and people of color primarily in prison, instead of investing in human capital to retrain, rehabilitate, which is the original premise of incarceration, is the notion of rehabilitation. These are people that are wasting away in prison that could be used to do things that are needed: street cleaning, graffiti removal, services that we desperately need. In suburbia, weeds are now 10 feet tall. Ticks and Lyme disease now is all over the place because we let the weeds grow. We are incapable of doing simple things, but we're willing to spend this massive, I think California alone in the last 4 years has spent over $20 billion just to shift the homeless from one hotel to another. It's absurd. Just buy them a house and end it because it's going to be cheaper in the long run. It's costing us, the sum of us is costing all of us. And our human capital is being wasted. There's no reason why people can't be retrained. You have to do psychological testing and the ones that are truly mentally ill from the ones that are suffering from poverty behind bars. There's a difference on who you can train and retrain to enter society in a dignified way and use that labor. We need the labor. There's still open jobs. There's still room for people to come and do the basics of society and bring dignity back, especially to the carceral system to use some of that human capital. Plus education. It's shameful that schools are running without textbooks, or you got overcrowding in schools. or you're closing schools. They're closing schools. They don't even care if the kids show up anymore. They use the pandemic as an excuse. So where are we going to go as a society if we can't even enforce basic education?
Great points, Maria. Roger, you've got your hand up. Can somebody unmute Roger?
I don't see his hand up.
Oh, I saw it go up, but then I guess
He might have put it down. If he put it down, then
okay.
zoom
All right.
it from our view. There it goes.
There, yeah, it's there. I got it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see. I see. Wow, that's a really strict rule. It's like your hand must be raised before you get unmuted. So I was gonna just focus on the first question there: strong investment in people possible in our current political environment? And I think the strongest investment is just to make the people feel more empowered, and that's something that could be done by elucidating the true political environment that we're in. You know, it's mind blowing. You go across seas or even just neighboring countries, and you know, if you can describe to them as objective as possible what happened over the last 10 years in our country, when in trying to describe the political environment and the evolution that happened over those 10 years, you know, a large percentage of those people are going to think, you know, we need to get serious here and start doing the right thing. And I think one of those things is to empower voters, to get as many voters as possible aware of what each of these people that they're actually voting for are actually doing by having a direct tie to accountability that's visible and present as an app, even just like a quick, stupid little app that kind of tells you who's in the area, what do they represent, you know, this is what they're promising, and then this is when they're promising to do it, and did they do it? And then, you know, you can then really start to weed out the people who are sticking true to the broader good of just all people. Like everyone generally has the same basic needs, and everyone who's in public service is aware of that. And we just have to empower individuals who can't do something on their own, because as someone mentioned earlier, not everyone could be doctors, not everyone could be lawyers, engineers, etc., politicians. So empowering the people will be the strongest investment to make them more politically aware of what's happening in our environment today, as opposed to some of the falsehoods that are being pushed around quite easily. And it's also made more problematic by the fact that the internet is just a rabbit hole of bullshit. You can get buried in a matter of days, and all of a sudden your views are warped beyond repair sometimes.
Thank you. And I do just want to say, you don't have to have your hand raised to be unmuted, but if your hand is raised, Zoom puts you in front of our view so we can see you easier. Otherwise, we have to search through every participant to try to find you.
And Patricia has her hand
you to
up.
unmute.
You know, it's the isms. If you think of all the isms, that's the problems with our society and the world. Sexism, racism. Think of any ism. It's the downfall of our society. Why should I worry about who someone is having relations with? Why should I, you know, the issue between the man and the woman and ageism, worried about, oh, he's too old, young, or it's the isms. And, you know, it's that coupled with the class system that we have, and we do still have a class system in this country. You know, there are the people that want to be at the top and they don't want anyone else to be there because they want to be special, you know. And if you get a little bit of more money or get a little more wealth or a little more whatever, then that somehow they feel that what they have doesn't mean as much. So, you know, they want to stay there. And so that means you have to be there. And it gets in the way of our society being a better world, really. You know, better communities make better, you know, neighborhoods, and neighborhoods make better states. You know, it goes on and on and on until, you know, we have to start somewhere because we really don't have a lot of time. And if we think of time as being linear and it's going to go on as infinity, it's going to go on forever. But our planet is dying. We don't have a lot of time. And we need all the smart people, you know, we need to get together and figure out how we're going to survive because it's, you know, it's not looking too good. And that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Patricia.
On that last point, Wes, go ahead. Wes Edwards.
Well, one question I would, or one really imminent issue that addresses that answers this question is whether one political party is going to intentionally shut down investment in our economy within a matter of days by their own inability and unwillingness to invest in the basics of our government, that is keeping it open, keeping it functioning. And so there's a great deal of anxiety in my life right now about whether the government will stay open and it will perform its necessary functions. So I hope, you know, all the people on the call will be self-advocates and advocates for the community to try to say we want this sort of investment to take place and we need it.
That's a really good point in terms of the fact that Stiglitz points out that the majority, big majorities of Americans want investment. They support a number of ideas that aren't getting through, and they're not getting through in part because of our political system right now and the fact that it's locked up in the control of a minority. And he talks about the fact, very early on in the book, that it's not time for nibbling around the edges. It's actually time to make some sweeping changes. And you'll hear a little bit more about that as we go further into the book.
Great discussion. And Wes, I appreciate because it reminded me on NPR this morning, they highlighted the effect how the government shutdown would affect our federal firefighters who received a significant increase under one of the recent legislation the Biden administration passed. And ironically, California's wildfire season is just about to start all over again. And what a great timing to, not pay our federal firefighters. So just a way to humanize the conversation. All right. Robin requested going back to a question, and we have like 10 minutes. So we'll probably limit discussion to maybe like 2 participants, but feel free to share thoughts in the chat as well. And Robin, am I going back to the right question? This one?
Yeah, and we don't have to if you don't think there's enough time. I was just thinking that this one leads into that one well, and we could spend
let's do it.
like 5 minutes. So yeah, if any so sorry, okay, I'll read the question. With so much at stake, including our democracy, why does this concerted attack on the very institutions and ideas that have done so much for our civilization seem to resonate with so many? Okay, Roger, I'm gonna ask you to unmute.
I'll get it right the next time, I promise. No, short and sweet here. I think change is hard. Change is not easy. It is part of life, no matter what the situation is. Whether it could be exactly as picturesque as you wanted to, and I forget what movie it was, where it was all black and white and it became color. But the reality is, you have to deal with change, and sometimes there's some cognitive dissonance that makes the change extremely difficult. On top of what change is already difficult on its surface. So that I think that's definitely one of those things. And they just feel like things are changing around them, and it's something they're not familiar with, and they just think that things are actually, they're starting to feel like they're escaping from them when things are just actually just improving for the broader society, which is better for the entire country as a whole and the world as a whole, because this country represents so many different nations and you name it. So, yeah.
Some good things in the chat. I really liked simple. White people, men in particular, are scared to lose their power.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I do believe that that is a strong issue that got us to where we are. But as it becomes more and more apparent every day, people are going to lose regardless. People have already lost and are just going to continue to lose more if we don't, like Patricia said, get over some of these isms that continue to plague our society. Oh, and I also wanted to mention, because Patricia mentioned that we have a class system in this country. Another good book to read would be Isabel Wilkerson's Caste as well, because she talks about how racism informs our race, our class-based caste system in this country is informed by also our racial caste in this country. And Patricia, I see you have your hand raised, so I'm going to ask you to unmute.
We were talking about democracy as we think we know it in this country, but this country it's never really been a democracy in the true meaning of the word democracy. We don't know what that means. We talk about it, we say, we build institutions on democracy, but this country is not a true democracy. It never has been.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion around, like for instance, the Electoral College and how that effectively, both the Electoral College and our Senate, and how they dilute our democracy because they give outweighed political power to states and districts that have very small proportions of the population. They effectually give them outweighed votes because their representation is equal to that of places that have much denser populations. And the same with our Supreme Court. I think I was probably listening to NPR or something, where they were talking about how the fact that the Supreme Court is, one, a lifetime appointment, and two, how it is based on an appointment and not by any type of input from the general public, that it allows people to have a very strong concentrated power over governance for a large percent of the population, and they're not even elected.
All right, I'm going to fast forward to our very last question. as Annette speaks.
Number 6. Yeah, that one.
Go ahead, Annette.
I'm trying to, there we are. I was trying to mute.
You went back on mute, I think.
I think we've taken our democratic norms for granted for too long, especially those of us who benefited from those norms. And I think we just assumed that they were just going to continue forever. And I don't know about you all, but I definitely know that with the election of Trump, that notion that these democratic norms were going to continue forever, that got shattered for me. And I think, I don't know how anybody else feels, but I know for myself, it's like, uh-oh, it's going away, and I don't know what to do. I belong to a Get Out the Vote organization. I've been involved with them for 7 years. We go out every month, you know, getting for registrations and getting out the vote. But it's like, what do I do? So that's where I am. So even as I'm starting to learn more about economics and what's been happening through this book, I'm just like, oh no, here we go again. Like, here's a whole nother subject of things that are going wrong, and that have you know, the middle class is going away, etc. Those kinds of things, and I don't know how to reverse that. I, as a single person, I don't know how to reverse it.
Well, I guess part of it is we're all kind of like our own individuals and single people, but, you know, coming together in a book club and hearing ideas, you know, hopefully we each come back a little bit stronger, and we talk about it and we get other people involved as well.
And kind of taking it all the way back to a point that I think maybe Roger made at the beginning of the meeting about the importance of education. I feel like that's what we're doing here, right? We're educating ourselves, even though, like, you know, people say, oh, it's just a book club. We're taking the time, we're learning, and we're teaching each other by sharing ideas with each other. We're teaching each other, and it may be slow going and it may be painful, but I think what we're doing here, the fact that we exist as a group, is important.
I agree.
In the chat, folks have started saying some things. So well, weird, the public school teacher said education. But then Gloria listed off some good things: the post office, prisons, public schools, fire, and police. And then Kara added heat, water, electric, internet, healthcare. So some good things of areas of the market that should not be privatized. Anyone have ideas of markets that maybe could use some more regulation? Ooh, pay-gated roads.
Yeah.
Carbon producing industries. That's something that comes up in the book.
Go ahead, Roger and Patricia.
You know, this debate could go on for a long time, but one thing that could be more regulated, I would say, is that you know, industries that have extreme exposure to international influence and business, I think could use some degree of regulation, because what you would have is political individuals who are well versed to the global community and are involved with the other politicians across the world. So a concerted effort to make sure that the industries within our own boundaries and outside of our boundaries are more safeguarded, I think makes the most sense. But you know, the list goes on. So yeah.
Roger, there actually is quite a bit going on in that space in terms of some. I'm in Washington, and one of the areas that I focus on is national security issues. It's not necessarily for bettering our overall economy, but they're tightening down on regulations and review over who can invest, foreign investment in the United States. So you're definitely you've got your finger on the pulse of something that's happening. It's more on the defense side as opposed to focusing on control of elections or influence or things like that. But it's related.
Patricia, end us with your final thoughts on this question. We can't hit. There you go.
Yeah, okay. We were talking about institutions that should be regulated, and a lot of the things that I came up with, such as like I agreed with you, the banking, insurance, any fiduciary institution, they are regulated, but some are regulated by the state, whereas some are regulated by the federal government. And it's not enough. Maybe we need another form of regulators. So it's not just state feds. Maybe it should be someone else to get in on the regulation, part of it, because it's not working too well. Food, for instance. I don't know. A lot of the food is crappy these days. I'm like, wait a minute, this is what's being put for us in the supermarket. This shouldn't even be given to dogs. But food, and building codes, how they're building buildings now, something is wrong. Our infrastructure is not good. So we need another tier, maybe another group of regulators that are not connected with money, institutions, and companies, and the fat cats. Maybe people just like us. Another group of regulators, maybe. The ones we have aren't working.
Right. And I really like too in the chat how thank you, Patricia. I like how folks in the chat talk about, I didn't think of it as a market, but I see lobbyists and then also voting rights and a federal regulation or standard for voting rights, and kind of goes back to, protecting our democracy and ensuring that the interest of the people, a people first interest. Can't think of anything more democratic than ensuring and standardizing voting rights across the nation because of how everything can be different in every state. So